Good morning everyone, and welcome to Magic in Mind. My name is Maggie Rose Cunningham. I'm the founder of magginrose.com, which has a mission to help magical people who are called to walk the pathways of the spirit traditions of Northern Europe to claim the deepest potential of their magic and to communicate what they do to the people who they want to serve. And today we're going to be exploring the forgotten names of the mystic, of the northern mystic, I should say. And it's such a huge topic. It's an enormous topic, so I should say that there is we do a bit of a deeper exploration in Yggdrasil's Path, which is one of my mastery programs after Awaken. But today we're going to take as deep a dive as we can. We are certainly not going to be able to cover every single name of all of the different names that we have from the existing literature for people who've followed a path that we might describe as mysticism, but we'll cover some of them. Morning, Erica. As you come in, please do say hello in the chat box. It's lovely to see who is here live with me today, and it's also lovely to see those of you who are here on the replay. If you're here on the replay, please do press hashtag replay and give me a wave so that I know that you're here, and obviously you can ask any questions as I'm going through in the chat box as well. So as I was preparing for this session, I was planning to reread The Way of Weird by Brian Bates. Have any of you read The Way of Weird? Love The Way of Weird. I read it years and years and years ago, and I had a copy. It was lovely. It was a blue edition on my shelves. And I went to find it because my book club is reading it in a couple of weeks' time, and I couldn't find her. I was like, what? Isn't that really weird? Sometimes that happens, and I think, well, I'm sure it's gone to a good home. I must have lent it to somebody back in the day at some point. So I got a new copy. And in the introduction, and I don't know whether this is a new introduction or whether I just don't remember this bit, it talks about Brian being given the title, an honorary title of wizard by the Council of Elders. And the Council of Elders is a foundation-funded project on worldwide indigenous wisdom. And they wanted to give him a title that honoured the tradition that he was bringing to them, and obviously that's quite difficult for them. And I love that it was wizard. Now, wizard is an interesting one because wizard is it is an older word. It's not like a modern word by any means, but sort of maybe Middle English, Old English. And so you can use it as a term for a northern mystic. But for me, when I think wizard, I think Wizard of Oz comes up for me. That's probably the first thing that I ever watched that had the word wizard in. There's Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, and he's pretty cool. You know, I wouldn't mind being Gandalf's mate, I'm going to be honest. Obviously, we've got the Harry Potter books as well, so there's quite a lot of stuff to get through before we could say, you know, what does wizard actually mean in the context that Brian is talking about? And I would definitely recommend The Way of Weird. Here we go, la 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 la, as something to read if you're interested in that. But what this reminded me of is that one of the challenges we have with names for the Northern tradition is that the names that we do have, we know very little about what they actually meant. We have to look etymologically at what the word means. We don't always have the meaning coming through. We might have very, very short snippets about what the word means. So that's one challenge, is what if I say I'm a wizard, what does that actually mean? Because, you know, we're not, much as we might all find it fun, we're not travelling around in lovely robes yelling Expelliarmus everywhere, you know, left, right and centre. It's a different thing, isn't it? So what does it mean to be a wizard? And the second thing is that the word mystic, which is Greek, it's not Northern European, but it's a useful word, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, the etymology of it is related to the idea, eventually, of being initiated, of having like someone or something that is a gatekeeper for you. And that's a challenge for us because I think that's true in many, many magical traditions. I believe that it would be true of the Northern tradition as well, is that the titles that are given to people who might be considered to be elders, who might be considered to be offering like incredibly valuable service to their communities, tend not to be self-declared. They tend to be given to us. Or I say us, but we don't have them. We can't go down the road to speak to the local seidr-woman or have a chat with the Haegtesse. You know, where are they? Well, I know there are some out there, but it's to have someone who offers that naming to us is not something that is available to most of us, and so that can be very challenging as well. So I'm going to talk about why naming is important, why it's challenging, how we might be able to navigate that as people who are interested in the Northern tradition and might want to be able to talk about, who I am and what I do. Hi Erica, Sarah says, I love wizards, Gandalf, Merlin. Oh yes, indeed. Still need to read. I would definitely read it, Erica. I've just started, I have read the beginning and I was like, I've forgotten so much. Yeah. And Maggie's saying we should have a trip around in robes. Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I love a robe. I absolutely love a robe. And Suki says, class starts and son-in-law strolls into chat. Oh, okay. Bless him. Hello all. Lovely to see you, Suki. Okay, so I would love to know from you, how many of you do trance work or shamanic journeying, or perhaps connecting with the spirits of the land or of the hearth, or working with deity, or perhaps you do ancestral healing, or maybe you do shape-shifting work, or perhaps you're a visionary artist. Any of those things, if any of those are relevant to you, shout me in the chat box. That's me. So all of those things and more I would place into the basket of what we might mean by the mystic. So the mystic goes out into the world around them to receive wisdom, knowledge that's not available to them from in here. It's available to us from the spirit world in some way. And so they need to be able to do that travelling journey. Hi Neil, lovely to see you. It's lovely to welcome somebody new into the community. Helena says, yay, we got me, I do. All of that mentioned. Yes, people are saying. Good. All of these things are an act of journeying out, of faring forth, we sometimes say. Now, and they can blend. So if you're thinking, hold on, I do ancestral healing and that's different, and I'm following the path of the healer. But the mystic is the one who does that connecting with the unknown, the part that we can't find inside, that requires us to journey down into the depths beyond our own edges to connect with something bigger than us, which is why we sometimes talk about the realm of the imagination as being the realm of the mystic, the realm of faith as being the realm of the mystic, because you wouldn't bother, would you, if you thought that nothing was out there? You'd just be like, no, what are you talking about? We can see that in the modern world quite a lot, can't we? This idea, you're wasting time in fantasy, that sort of thing. You're a daydreamer, or those sorts of things. So that's a lack of faith. That there is something beyond that's maybe helping us or supporting us or has wisdom to offer to us. Oh, you did Katie Gerard's ancestral healing course. Wonderful, Suki. Yes, isn't Katie fantastic? So all of these are the path of the mystic. And what tends to happen in the modern world, I would say, with naming, and you can let me know what you think about this, is that we like to name and categorize because it gives us a sense of legitimacy, let's say, within a framework of the world where we like to sort of be able to say this is this, we like to categorize, we like to separate, we like to define, don't we? Very much in, perhaps a little bit overexpressed in the sage realm in the world at the moment. We're not comfortable with stuff that we can't name or understand, which is a problem for the mystic, bearing in mind that that's pretty much where they operate, is in the realm of things that we can't yet name or understand and that need to be brought back and integrated into the world around us. I was thinking about this and thinking about context here, because I think this is important when we think about naming. So this is one of the reasons why I did a slightly formal introduction to myself, at the beginning. I was like, my name is Maggie Rose Cunningham. I'm the founder of Maggie Rose, which is an organisation dedicated to supporting magical humans who are called into the Northern European spirit pathways to claim the depths of their magic and to communicate what they do to the people they want to serve. It was pretty much what I said, wasn't it? And sometimes we need to say that, because the modern world requires that we say that. Someone says, what do you do? And I can't really say, I'm an accountant, because I'm not. But, you know, people have an idea. The names and labels are a shorthand. They're a bit lazy. Can't believe that I said that. The sage would not say that. The sage would say this is a speedy way for me to communicate to you what I do based on a mutually understood term that has been defined within a dictionary maybe, or in a sort of archetypal sense, you know, so that we can say what we do. Which is all well and good, except for the mystics going, yeah, but my job is to expand those terms or disrupt those terms or, you know, move them on. And I think it's important to recognise that this is contextual. So if I was, let's say I was in like Beowulf, or I was, we were talking about Gandalf, weren't we? So let's say I'm like Theoden, or I'm Aragorn, son of Arathorn, you know, something like that. I wouldn't say, you know, I'm Maggie, I do all of these things, blah, 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 blah. I'd probably say, you know, I am Maggie of Biggleswade, born in Harrow, to Linda of the Foxes of Dorset, and Roger of the Newtons of Southampton. You know, I'd say that. And you might go, oh, that's interesting. But that doesn't really mean anything to you unless you happen to have family who came from Southampton or Dorset or Harrow or Biggleswade, or your mum happens to be called Linda as well, or your dad happens to be called Roger. You know, you have to build those connections because our communities are very different to what they were before. So if I had said previously, I'd talked to you about the place that I came from and my heritage, my ancestral heritage, it's quite likely that we might have, in the smaller communities, either shared some of that heritage or we would have known the places that we were being talked about. So there would be I would be giving relevant and interesting contextual information about myself that would help somebody else to understand what I'm doing. You know, but nowadays, not so much. So naming is contextual. So when we think about naming in the context of the path of the mystic and the Northern tradition, I want us to bear in mind that naming is a process of discovering ourselves, you know, finding our personal identity, sort of saying, you know, okay, I know that I'm interested. Maybe you saw a rune or you saw a book, you saw The Way of Weird or something like, you know, you read it and then you went, well, where's my place within this? What am I called for? You're going to look for role models, for examples of people and how they work within that tradition to help you and support you in order to discover your personal identity. And it's also a process of revealing self to others, but only if they have a shared vocabulary, with you. Otherwise it's trickier, isn't it? It's harder. Let's be honest, we're in that harder space. So I said we would talk a little bit about terms. Some of the terms that come up that probably are most, we've talked about wizard already, haven't we? We've talked about wizard, and that's, it's a little bit of a challenging word. Witch is another term, a slightly older term than wizard, not hugely so, but also a little bit problematic in that it's used in many, many different contexts. You know, witch is not used exclusively for Northern tradition, nor is wizard really, by any means. It can have very negative connotations in some cultures. It comes along with like witch wounding. We've been looking at that in the Amplified programme, you know, going quite deep into witch wounding recently. And so the process of claiming the identity of wizard or witch might require quite a lot of unpacking to sort of say, well, what does this mean for me? What does it mean for other people? Do I feel safe claiming that for myself? Do other people already have a version of what this means in their minds that might have nothing to do with what I actually do? But it could make it very difficult for me to reveal myself because I'm not revealing myself. I'm revealing something that is in their head and I don't even always know what that is. Yeah, grace and witch hasn't ever really felt right for me and myself. And that's important. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, like personal resonance as well. I've mentioned the term mystic as well. You know? And mystic, it's a Greek word. I use the term mystic when I describe the 5 magical pathways. I quite deliberately choose terms that aren't culturally specific in the same way as some of the terms that we've been using that are now used more archetypally. Maybe because they often come from the Greek or the Latin. They're sort of quite old and they've been shared, you know, across cultures for so long. So they've lost a little bit of that cultural specificity. They become generic in some ways. So we can use mystic, and as I've mentioned, the word mystic can mean to be initiated into, and that's sort of important for us in terms of thinking about how do we claim the path of the mystic for ourselves, and recognising that all of us can follow. We can all develop the toolkit of the mystic and use the toolkit of the mystic. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to claim mystic as part of our identity or to reveal ourselves using the word mystic, but it's available to us. The other one that resonates quite strongly with this path of the mystic that we're exploring at the moment is shaman. And again, I sort of thank members of my community who've opened up some really interesting discussions around the use of the word shaman. Now, for myself, when I trained in shamanic practice, my teachers always said, use the term shamanic practice, not shaman, because shaman is a culturally specific term. The Tungusic peoples, I hope I pronounced that right, the Tungusic peoples, so Siberian, Chinese, Mongolian, particularly Siberian, it came from there, and it has been used, and it's sort of now falling more into that category of sort of the mystic or the magician, less culturally specific. But there is that means that for those of us who want to use that term, we have to be quite careful about, am I comfortable doing that? Am I comfortable being part of that generalizing of a term which actually is owned by and part of the identity of a specific group of people? So I always use the term shamanic practitioner until quite recently, and the reason that I stopped using it, I use some shaman now in my LinkedIn profile. I don't use it everywhere, but I do use it in some places, because people were saying, I don't understand what you do. And it was this navigating of my personal identity and my revealed self-identity, where I needed to be able to communicate what I was doing in a way that people would understand. But it was a decision that I didn't take lightly, and I certainly don't use it everywhere that I go, because I'm aware that it's a challenge. But the reason we tend to use these is, well, I'm going to talk about that right now. So I'm going to ask you, as I go through some of these terms, and these are not by any means this is not a definitive list, how many of these you recognise? Burgrune, Dru or Drukraft, Erilaz, Vitki, Seidkona, Goði, Gyðja, Haegtesse, Helrune, Leodrune, Spakona, and see if I can pronounce this one, Wyrtgælstre. How many of those did you recognise, even if you don't know what they mean? I didn't say Völva actually, which is one that I'm expecting that quite a few of you will recognise. But let me know if you recognise any of those terms. And what I'm going to say is that all of those terms, I went through and I looked at like some of the course material for Yggdrasil's Path, where we look at this is the very first piece that we do, is looking at some of these people, these figures from our literature. Is excuse me. I went through and I pulled out the ones that you could say, yeah, I can feel that there's a path of the mystic there. It's not a definitive list, and even the lists that I use in Yggdrasil's Path, I'm always finding new terms, and it can be incredibly challenging with all of these terms, and I will talk about some of them as well, don't worry. It can be incredibly challenging with these terms, even if you find them. Wikipedia is your friend if you want to start searching for some of them, but to then find where they actually come from. And that's really difficult. And I'm not going to pretend that I found all of these by any means, because a lot of the articles that you find about these will talk about, they'll say, this comes through etymologically from this word back to this one and then to the Proto-Germanic, but they don't cite where the word was. Sometimes they're found within the Anglo-Saxon chronicles and texts, sometimes in the Icelandic sagas, some of them within the Eddas. There's lots of different places where they're found, but I'm fairly certain that some of them, I just don't know which ones yet, aren't actually found in the literature. They've sort of been crafted from older terms. But yes, some of them are in there, and we know that they're there, and they're used. So that's why I wanted to bring them today. So if we look at Burgrune, I don't know where my throat's going. That's really annoying, isn't it? Burgrune means hill rune, and rune tends to mean a rune. We've got the word rune in there, but if you think about rune as meaning like a secret or a mystery, and then we've got the hill. It's like somebody who has the wisdom of the hill. And again, you can take more and more leaps, and you can say, well, hillsides were often used, Lithjabjörg as one of them, as places that were considered to be places of healing, or places that had magical power. We know, if you think about, if you've ever been to one of those ancient hillside and sat on the top, they're magical places. So this is someone who works with perhaps magics of place, is what you might say. Dru comes from the same root as druid. So it's a drucraft, like magical craft. Erilaz, said to mean magician. That's one of the less, it's more a murky term. It's difficult to find out where that comes from. Vitki is one that I resonate with. It sort of means wise. It's a wise person. And when I first read about it, which was years ago now, it says that it's a non-affiliated magical person. So not part of a particular group. So I went for that because I was like, I'm not part of a particular group. I've run groups. But it's I've trained with people, but I've never been like a member of a particular group. Seidkona, so the practice of seethe, drumming and voice, and work with the dead, and work with the land, work with energy, and kona, which means woman. Goði and Gyðja both mean priest or priestess in of what we don't know. Haegtesse I particularly liked. Haegtesse means hedge rider. You can think about this as being someone who is able to cross over the boundaries between worlds. You also get Haegtesse as well, which I haven't looked at here, but you can see there's lots of different connotations of the same word. Helrune, so similar, we've got that rune, that understanding of the mysteries, and then hell is the realms of the dead. Leodrune, the same, but understanding of the mysteries of tribe with Leod. And Wyrtgælstre is plant charmer, a person who charms plants. So when you're starting to think, for me, about what path do I take within the Northern tradition, who might I resonate with, who might my forebearers be, I always start with step one, as I think to myself, well, unless you want to become a champion for these names, you want these names to be known, it's an important part of your calling. For some people it is. I start with modern English words. Rather than sort of saying, okay, I'm going to use these older terms, I go, okay, so what am I actually? So am I actually a plant charmer? That's what I do. So start to actually look at, what do I do in terms of my practice? Spakona, actually, I didn't cover that one, did I? Spakona means like speaking or foretelling woman. So yeah, I tell fortunes. I said priest or priestess, didn't I? I said hedge rider. So when I work within my communities and within my training programs, we often look at what is it that we do. We talk about wayfaring. So for the Yggdrasil's path, we talk about being a wayfarer. Potentially we could say hedge rider, we're travelling between the worlds. But because we're journeying and we're finding ways, we're going along the path, that just seemed more, it does what it says on the box a little bit. You could talk about being a destiny weaver or a fate weaver. I still use the term weird weaver, so even though weird is not a modern English term, it's quite well known now, and I like it because when we talk about fate or destiny, it can be seen as being something that is foretold. This will happen, whereas weird is more flowing, it's more working with, through partnership. Tree singer, somebody who sings with the trees, is a little bit like a plant charmer, isn't it? But a bit different. I sing with the trees, or in my case, I've used that term before for myself. It's about singing to the tree, to Yggdrasil itself. Spirit soother, somebody who brings healing to spirit, to the world of spirit. Ancestral healer. One of the first testimonials I ever got, someone said to me, they said, Maggie, you are my magical doorway opener. And I loved that so much that I still think about it today. And this is one of the things I'm going to ask of you sort of action for you in thinking about this mystic pathway is to recognize that if someone in your community, or in this community, if you're in the hearth space, or who works within the Northern tradition, who works within a tradition which is largely, we're looking at it through fragmented, incomplete sources, tell them what you see, tell them what you see them doing, tell you what they contribute that is of value to you, working on the assumption that they may well not see it themselves. That's why this naming is important. At one point I ran a guild for Northern European practitioners, and we would once a year we would have a naming ceremony where names that would be offered from the community to people within the guild, often proposed by spirit, rather than, I think I need to give somebody a name. So often like proposed by spirit. Somebody would go on a journey and they would say, I got this name and I felt into it and it feels right, I'm going to offer it to you now. And it was a naming ceremony of offering and receiving. So do that. Be the person who says, you are you did this, I saw that. So important. Edge walking is one of the terms that I often use to refer to the path of the mystic. So that's the first thing that I would suggest, is just to spend some time thinking about what does my practice say about who I am and what I do. Now, if you're pursuing a personal calling, first of all, I'd say it's worth bearing in mind that even when we do have accounts, so Völva, for example, the Völva being like the seeress, we know a little bit more about the Völva, but what we know is largely from one account. It comes from, it's an account of a lady called Fjorburg Little Völva, like that, Little Völva, from the saga of Eric the Red, and it's a very rich description of this journeying seeress who goes from town to town, and she talks, she gives prophecy and supports the community, and it talks about what she wears and the wand that she has, and so we get a lot from there. But it's worth bearing in mind that that's like one of the richest accounts we have of a Northern European practitioner, and it is of one person. And it's interesting, when I went and I did a little search for the term Völva, and I looked at some of the websites, and it says a Völva will always wear gloves of catskin, always have this, always have that, and it's like, well, we don't know that. We know that one person did, who happened to have that title. We don't know when she got it, who gave it to her. We don't know if she always turned up wearing that. This is like one account. Maybe she happened to have the gloves and they were given to her in the previous village. We don't know those things, but they do give us accounts that we can work with. So this is the first thing to say. But that doesn't mean that we can't follow that literature and we can't use it to guide us in our practice, because it's all that we have, and it is always worthwhile. We don't want to dismiss the path of the sage, go off on the daydreaming path of the mystic without the weight of the sage and the structure of the magician and the what's needed now of the healer and the deep knowing of the seer. We want those things as well. But it might well be that if you feel a calling to a particular name, that you're like, oh no, this is a rite of passage for me, this is an initiation, perhaps that has been offered to you by spirit in the absence of elders who are able to say, oh yes, we can see that you are a Gyðja in the making. But it might be that one of those terms resonates with you strongly. And that's something for your personal pathway, in which case, do the digging as much as you can. And it can be difficult because we can get put off and we're like, oh, I can't find anything. But, keep going and ask. Ask in the hearth space, ask in the community. Has anyone seen any sources for this word? So for me, I said that the word Vitki stood out for me, and it was many years ago now. And it's still, I see it more as a little bit of a tug, like a pull to me on my personal journey that I will use when I'm seeking to unfold my next step. So I don't necessarily say, I am a Vitki. I say, I am pursuing the path of the Vitki. And that helps me in terms of my focus, by thinking that in terms of my focus. But having said that, it is, I believe, possible. If we work with the ancestors, if you work on the ancestral paths, if you work with particular spirit guides, if you go down to the mounds of the Völva and the Seidkona, outside of Helheim, and you consult with them, that you may end up having somebody who is a personal teacher and guide for you, and I'm okay with that. You are perfectly entitled to decide one way or the other whether you're okay with that. If somebody came and they said, yes, I received guidance from a particular Völva who I went with many journeys on, and this is now my practice, and I was taught it, and I call myself a Völva because of that. I think that there are those of us in our community for whom that is a genuine and an authentic path. Does that probably, I'd still be like, yeah, this is an initiated path on the route of the mystic. We don't have the sage knowledge to back that up, because we don't have, my family tree that goes back all the way through. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we did? But we don't. I wanted to finish today with a sort of little bit of a philosophical piece. So the first thing I wanted to do is to say, just remember what I said about, if you're following this pathway, look at what you do, look at the practices that you're drawn to. Don't feel forced into saying, I have to follow a particular route. I have to know whether I'm a Helrune or a Burgrune or I'm following Drucraft. I don't believe that's true. We are not our ancestors. Our lives are not the same as theirs. The communities that we serve have different needs to the communities that they served. And I think that is incredibly important for us as practitioners, as leads in our families. Maybe we're the spiritual elders in our own families, to follow the path that we feel is right for us. So look at those practices, look at them, and give yourself the ability to name that, and be generous in your feedback with others as well, in terms of saying, you're the person that I go to for X, Y, and Z. But what I wanted to say in terms of the northern tradition itself, and more I'm finding, I use the word northern tradition because it's difficult. Even naming what it is that we do and what's hosted within this space is very challenging. But the word tradition obviously suggests that there's a fixed tradition that we're following, which is not the case. I believe that our entire tradition is going through an initiatory process right now. I imagine the gods diving deep under the earth in the last 1,000 years, going down into the depths and finding their own guidance for what's needed in the eons to come, that they sort of went on a big retreat themselves. They said, Midgard needs to find its way through this technological, enlightened, monotheistic age, for whatever reason that needs to happen. And we need to go and find this new wisdom so that when we come back, we can guide humanity on its next path, because it's going to get itself in trouble. There's going to come a point where it's separated from its relationship with the earth and spirit, to the point that we're going to need to return. And I feel as if this process of not having names, of not having labels or categories, or I can go into this space and train with this group and learn this way, is actually an incredibly important part of this process. I talk about Utengard and Innengard as being Innengard, it's like the inner enclosure, the known enclosure, the place of naming and belonging and understanding and shorthand terms for what we are and what we do. And Utengard is the place of new beginnings and new power and new potential that defies naming and convention, and asks us to be in a wild space where we don't have names and where we might be uncomfortable, and where it's difficult for us to say to people, this is who I am and this is what I do. And I think that that's where we are. We're in an Utengard space of discovery and exploration. And Candice was saying unnaming something can be just as powerful as naming something. Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree. It's you will know that I took my I gave it my family name and took a different surname, and I thought quite a lot about that. And I did research into both family trees, and I looked at, do I want to bring this family into my energy field? Do I want to connect with it? And I wanted to have children, all of those types of things. And it was very powerful stepping out of one name and into another, which those of you who've done like initiation as well, if you've done initiation and you've received another name or a new title, there is a period of time which I don't think we honour enough, and perhaps we should. Legally we are not able to do it. You step from being one name into another, don't you? But there is this time of sort of going, right now I'm in potential, I'm in possibility. What might I become? So to take our time in stepping into the possibilities of the future, where there might be more wizards, named by other traditions to sort of help us as we emerge once more. There might be there might be Vitki who band together and say, yes, this is my experience, this is your experience, what do you say about this? Should we now look at trying to create a definition that works for us now? That might happen, but we're not there yet. And that's quite exciting, I think that's quite exciting. So rather than saying like who we are for now, I would suggest that we say what we do, and that we honour and step into that power of unnaming. In the same way that, I've just suggested, and it's just my suggestion, that the gods might have done, that they said, yes, let's take off the things that have shaped and structured us and go back to the rawness, go back to the place where stories are told on the tongue and not read in a book, which means that they can change. Suki's saying, interesting terminology, naming and not the labelling that the world gives us. Yes. Yeah, it is interesting, and that's something that maybe to feel into, is that difference between naming and labelling and consent. Consent about what I want to be called, what I don't want to be called. And perhaps some of these words, the shaman, the witch, the wizard, the mystic, maybe not quite. I don't know in different traditions if there's some people who have more legitimacy to claim those terms for themselves, or that labelling can be an act of violence towards somebody, can't it? When we're attaching a lot of meaning to something, as opposed to self-naming in a way that feels informed. So, yes. If this has been of interest to you, a couple of things for you to consider would be, if you haven't done a Drazel's Path with me, if you are a graduate of Awaken, you can absolutely join a Drazel's Path. We will be starting in autumn 2024, so you can get in touch. If you are on Awaken, or you are thinking of joining Awaken, you can also get in touch with me and ask. It's a readiness piece, so we just look at readiness if you're thinking about a Drazel's Path and you want to follow that path of the Northern European practitioner. And so if you have any questions about that, or if you want to explore your magical path but without necessarily the Northern tradition side, you can't keep the Northern tradition out of my work entirely, but it's there, then Amplify may be for you, which is that very deep dive exploration of the magical self, who I am and what I do. That comes with an Amplify. So you can drop me a line, we can book a discovery call and see where we go with that. So I hope that you have enjoyed this session. Tell me what you think, and remember that piece around naming each other. What is it that we see in each other, to help each other to say, yes, I might not be able to see the valuable things that I offer to other people. So always let people know if they share something valuable with you, what it is that you see in them. Let's get beyond labels and names into invitations and offerings and generous seeings of each other. I hope that you've enjoyed this session. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.